Welcome to Jazz in the Land, the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra podcast, featuring your host, Darrell Scott.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Jazz in the Land. I am Darrell Scott. Got a special guest today. I'm not going to get into everything because that would take the entire 20 minutes that we have, but he's done an awful lot. He's a very well-respected instrumentalist in the city of Cleveland. He's had some important roles with the CJO. We're going to talk about those. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Jack Schantz. Jack, how are you today, sir?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing the best I can, what little I got. Let's talk about are you from Cleveland?
I'm from Orville.
Why does that town sound familiar?
Smucker's Jelly.
Nick Dociato. I have a friend whose son works there. Janine will be happy that I've mentioned her name. So how did you get started into music and playing instruments?
Well, my high school and junior high school, I had a band director who was an ex-big band tenor player by the name of Perry Hosmer, and he exposed me and a lot of us to jazz music at a very early age. Like when I was in junior high school, I was listening to Chet Baker and Frank Sinatra and big bands and so forth. So that's how I kind of got the bug way back in that would have been 1969, 68 when I started.
And what instruments were you playing then?
Well, I started out on piano, and then I went to trumpet, and then all through high school I played the French horn because they didn't have any French horn players. But I played trumpet in the jazz group.
Was the trumpet your choice, or was it a situation where it was given to you and you're going to focus on this?
I think I picked it. Yeah, I think it wasn't forced on me at all.
So then why the trumpet?
I don't know. I've never been asked that question. I think it was just, I guess, the sound of it. And if I'd have known how hard it was, I probably wouldn't have picked it. I probably would have stuck with the piano.
What's hard about it?
About the trumpet?
Yes.
Oh, everything. Especially as you get older. I mean, it's very physical, very demanding physically. Technically, there's a lot going on. Very small, minute muscle motion, and also large muscle groups, and then air and so forth. Fingers. It's one of the most difficult instruments of all to play, especially to play jazz on. That's why a lot of classical players and other trumpet players, they don't want to play jazz because just playing the trumpet's hard enough. But to play jazz on it, it's extremely difficult. So when you hear guys like Dizzy and Freddie and Clifford and Tom Harrell doing it, it's just incredible what they're doing technically. Did
you struggle in the beginning, or why did you persist at playing?
I think everybody struggles at first. It's a struggle to get a good sound, get good articulation, get flexibility, and get trumpet fingerings and so forth together. But I think why I persisted was because I was interested in improvising. I wasn't interested in just playing what was written. I was always kind of interested in making up my own stuff and playing along with the TV or playing along with records. I used to memorize all the TV themes from when I was a kid, and I would play along with TV show themes. And just try to pick out the melodies from here without looking at anything. So
did you play the theme from Starsky and Hutch?
No, but I played F Troop. Leave It to Beaver. Wild Wild West. Mannix. I Spy. Route 66, all those things that are on Nick at Night now.
So as you get older, how do you gravitate to the CJO? How does your journey from, let's say, high school, how do you get to the CJO?
Well, after I attended Akron University, and the guy who was in charge of the jazz program there was a guy named Roland Paolucci, who was very, very influential guy for many, many people. And I was lucky enough to be one of them. And after I graduated from Akron U, we had just played a tour of Europe and played the Montreux Jazz Festival. And 2 days after I got back from that, I joined the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, flew out to Minneapolis, and played my first job with them. Then when I came back after that experience, Roland was directing the CJO. So I was able to join the band. That was 1988 when I joined. And I played on the band ever since. And I think it was 2000. I'm really bad on dates, man.
Fine. That's fine.
But the board of directors asked me if I'd be interested in taking over for Roland, and I said I would. It was a hard decision because Roland was my teacher and my mentor. But so I stayed in that role for 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had done about everything I thought I could do with the music and the direction and the concept. I thought it was kind of time for somebody else to come along and try their hand at it. So I decided that if I could still be useful, I'd like to play in the trumpet section, which I've been doing ever since. So
I want to back up a bit. So you're just out of high school, so to speak, and you get the job, and you're going to the Montreux Jazz Festival.
I went to high school also. I mean, my high school band went to the Montreux Jazz Festival.
Let's talk about that. You're a teenager.
Yeah.
And you're going over to Switzerland.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a fantastic band. We actually had a guy write a whole suite of music for us. We commissioned a guy. He was a writer, arranger, composer in the, I think he was in the Air Force or Navy, I forget which. But really talented guy from Canton originally. His name was Errol Schleybaugh. He played saxophone. He was a great doubler, but a great writer. And he wrote a whole 20, 30-minute concert piece for us, and we played it all over Europe after the Montreux Jazz Festival.
So I just can't imagine being that young.
Yeah.
And then having that responsibility of playing abroad and don't get me wrong, in my history with jazz, the Montreux Jazz Festival is a huge festival.
Oh, yeah.
And you're playing it. You're one of the participants making your own mark playing this music.
Yeah.
Little nervous, little not sure if I can do this.
I don't think I was nervous. It was very exciting because, we're hanging out backstage and, we run into Lee Konitz and Dizzy and Bob Brookmeyer, and they're all there, and we're just hanging out backstage with them. So after I graduated from high school, I sat out for a year, and I worked for my dad, and then I met Roland, and then I went to Akron U, and then my senior year at Akron U, we went back to the Montreux Jazz Festival, and actually we stayed in the same hotel that I stayed at when I was in high school. It's amazing.
That's an amazing life. Let's talk about your life as a member of the CJO. What was it like to be in command or in charge of or being the artist in residence for an organization like that? And what did you want to bring to that group?
Well, I wasn't the artist in residence. I was the artistic director.
Or artistic director. Okay.
I was in charge of picking the music and picking the themes and picking the guest artists. So my idea was to kind of make it a repertory group where I would pick one guy or one group, and we would do like the music of Stan Kenton or Woody Herman or Claude Thornhill or Duke Ellington or Count Basie. And then I would focus on certain writers, and I would bring in, I would call these guys out in LA or New York, and I would ask them, would you like to come to Cleveland and spend a week here with us, and we'll do a concert of all your music. So I had Billy Byers and Bill Holman and Bob Brookmeyer, Frank Foster, Sammy Nestico, Rob McConnell, Slide Hampton, Bill Finnegan, Claire Fisher, Bob Florence, Maria Schneider. I'm just trying to think. There were so many of them. And then we would have different guest artists too. I had the Four Freshmen a number of times, and so it was always a balancing act between what would be artistically satisfying to me and to the band, and what would be sellable to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a tough sell, because a lot of the people that I was interested in playing weren't well known.
Okay.
Even the board members didn't know who they were, and I had to sell them on the idea of bringing in a guy like Bill Finnegan, who was arguably one of the greatest arrangers of our music who ever lived. Matter of fact, when I was talking to Bob Brookmeyer and I was asking him to come to Cleveland, he was not interested. He was not very receptive to the idea. And then in desperation, I started rattling off all the names of the people that we've had. And I said, well, we've had Bill Finnegan twice. And he goes, you've had Finnegan twice? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay, I'll do it.
Nice.
So that just goes to show you the respect and admiration that Finnegan had among all the great writers. So we would do a week of their music, and it was just absolutely incredible to get to play with these guys and learn their music. And it was always very challenging because we only had 2 or 3 rehearsals, and then we had to play 2 concerts. Back then we did I think it was 2 rehearsals, 2 or 3 I don't remember now. 3 rehearsals and 2 gigs. And some of the music was pretty hard. Some of it wasn't, but a lot of it was. One of the things I remember most about that experience was a lot of times when I would call these guys and they would come in and do it, they didn't have very high expectations. They kind of thought it was going to be lame. And it was always such a thrill for me to watch their eyes widen as soon as they heard the band play.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, they weren't expecting that at all, to have such a great band. And it really was. I mean, we were playing at a very, very high level.
No, that would be because of you and the expectations you have, if I'm correct, right?
I don't know if I can take credit for that. I mean, everybody was very dedicated, and we all grew up playing these guys' charts, so we wanted to do a good job for them. We wanted to do their music justice and to show them that we were serious about
Mm-hmm.
it. And so I think everybody was of a like mind in that way.
Okay. In your days now, you are an educator. As an educator, if I come to you, and don't get me wrong, trust me, Darrell has no musical talent whatsoever. I struggle with manual dexterity and all that sort of stuff. I leave it up to guys like you. But if I'm a student of yours, give me some words of wisdom to follow so I can get my career to where yours is.
To be a player, you mean?
And be a player, yes.
Well, it's a lot different now than when I was coming.
Mm-hmm.
When I was coming up, there was a lot more work, and there was a lot more opportunities. And when I was out with Buddy Morrow, we would stay at this hotel in New York, the Hotel Edison, and that's where all the bands would stay. So we would be in New York, and there'd be like 5 bands there. They're all out touring. Basie Band, Buddy Rich, Kenton, Ellington, Woody. Now there aren't any. There's only one that I know of, and that's the Glenn Miller Band that's out all the time. So there isn't that much opportunities for young guys to go out and learn that discipline of being on the road and playing the same music every night after night for years. So I think people have to be a lot more resourceful than I was. I just kind of basically waited for the phone to ring. But then again, nowadays there's so much more technology, and they have way more opportunities for hearing music. When I was coming up, I would go to these record stores, these used record stores, and spend 2 or 3 hours thumbing through the bins of music, hoping to find something, because I only had a couple bucks, and I had to make every one count. So, so listening for me was really, really different. It wasn't something that I did while I was doing something else. I was really actively listening. I'd get my headphones out and I would listen, and that was all I was doing. And then when I met Roland, he had an unbelievable record collection, and I just systematically went through his whole record collection, listened to it. So I think what I would say to somebody right now is, and I see this with kids today, with a lot of exceptions, of course, but a lot of kids, they're just not listening. They don't listen to the music, and they don't listen to the tradition, So when I was coming up as a trumpet player, I made it a point of collecting jazz trumpet players, and sometimes the more obscure the better for me. So I was listening to all kinds of West Coast guys that nobody had heard of really around here, and guys who were not top tier players like Diz and Miles and Freddie and Clifford. I was listening, checking out guys like Donald Byrd and Connie Candoli and Jack Sheldon and Don Fagerquist and Don Ferrara, guys who were fantastic trumpet players, but they didn't get the recognition that other guys did. I was a big fan of Clark Terry. So I would just listen to these guys, and I would just steal everything from them. I would just steal whatever I could play. Chet. I mean, I love Chet because I could cop what he was doing. Dizzy he was like from another planet. There was no way technically I could cop what Dizzy was doing. But Chet, I could actually play his lines. So he was a really important influence on me at first, because that's really where I learned how to play lines, listening to Chet and stealing from him. So I think what I would say is, the first thing when you're learning this language is you just got to listen to people speaking it over and over and over. And then later on, you can figure out what everything's called. But for a long time, I was playing stuff I had no idea what I was doing. If somebody asked me what I was playing, I would say, I don't know. It wasn't until much later that I was actually able to say, well, that's this chord, that's this scale, that's this alteration, that's whatever. This is chromaticism or whatever. So, I think the most important thing right now, somebody starting out, was do a lot of listening. In a kind of a humorous way, if I were to tell somebody in a joking way, what advice I would give them, I would say, don't ever trade fourths with Sean Jones.
I was going to ask, I think I read something that Sean said. What is ear training?
Ear training is the ability to hear and reproduce, to be able to hear something and repeat it. So mimicry, like when you're learning a different language, the best way to do it is just to listen to it and say it over and over and over again. And then it starts to sound like something. It's not grammar. It's training your mouth to make sounds that in English we don't make. And jazz is training your fingers and your tongue and your ear to make sounds that classical players don't make, that classical training doesn't train you to do. especially in terms of articulation. It's a
Mhm.
whole different game.
All right. Jack, this time has been very beneficial. I've enjoyed pretty much talking to you. I've learned an awful lot, especially
Oh,
about
good.
the ear training thing. I read that quote and I'm like, I have to ask him about this because I'm not sure I totally understand it. So now
What
you've
did
explained
Sean
it.
say your training is?
It was something that I read. He was just saying that he got a great ear training from you. So if nothing else, and I think I can say this, I will see you on May 1st.
Okay.
If this may run before then. If it does, we'll see what happens. Jack, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Good luck
man.
with the CJO. I will see you on many different occasions. The guy that comes up to you and waves to you, it'll be me. So don't
All
laugh.
right.
And so we'll talk soon. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Jazz in the Land, the original CJO podcast. There's more to come.
Do you have any instruments in need of a good home? The Cleveland Jazz Orchestra's Instrument Donation Program helps put instruments into the hands of students in need. Donate an instrument and you will receive a pair of tickets to one of our season series shows. Contact booking at clevelandjazz.org for more information.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Jazz in the Land, the original CJO podcast. My name is Darrell Scott. My guest today, he's from Cleveland. He spent some time in Chicago, but now he's back in Cleveland, and he's a guitar player. My other relatives would go, he's a guitarist, but no, he's a guitar player. His name is Dan Bruce. Dan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for
Not,
having me.
not a problem, sir. Let's get some history about yourself. You spent some time in Chicago. Now, my first question is this. I have frequented Chicago on many occasions. It has its own vibe, its own whatever, but jazz is one of the main things about Chicago. What's the difference between the Cleveland jazz scene and the Chicago jazz scene?
The biggest thing is just scale. There's
Hmm.
just a lot more musicians there. Um, because Cleveland's got a lot of great musicians as well.
Right.
And it's not like the level necessarily goes down. It's just that there are so many great people you can play with in Chicago. And uh kind of tap into the history a little bit, because, Chicago definitely was a part of jazz history. So I was lucky enough when I first got there. Von Freeman, the saxophone player, was still playing. He passed maybe 10 years ago now, but he was probably well in his 80s, and he was still doing a session on the South Side that went till 4 in the morning
Mm.
every week. And so like we would all drive down there just to be with this person. He was a guy that like when like Parker and Dizzy came through town, they asked him to come and play on their gigs. And so to just get to hang out with people like that and just hear their stories and have them hear you play and give you
Mm.
feedback and stuff. In my experience, it was a really welcoming scene. It was really nice because we moved there from Texas, and we were dead broke, and I was just very quickly trying to get gigs and teaching jobs and stuff. And it felt like people would just be like, "Oh, you're new. I need a sub next week. Why don't you do this?" Or, "Hey, we're having a barbecue. Come meet a bunch of people." And it felt like very like, come join us, which was really nice. And then, just lots of brilliant people to learn from, which I feel the same way about Cleveland. It's just on a much smaller scale. I was lucky when I lived here the first time, got to study with Dan Wall for a while, got to play with him a little bit, got to play with like, I'm still getting to play with Howie Smith off and on, and kind of the elders of this scene. Got to go see Eddie Backus all the time. And so, I think if you're hungry to learn and meet people and hear the music, both have similar things. Chicago just has a lot more of it.
I won't put you on the spot to tell me which one you think is better. We'll just go with the one that has the longer history. I won't do that to you. So what brought you from Chicago to Cleveland?
Well, my wife and I moved to Cleveland the first time for my wife.
Hmm.
And she was not my wife yet, but we eventually got married. The second time, we had been in Chicago for about 10 years. And the real answer, well, there were a number of things, but the thing that topped it off was our second child was twins. So we
Oh,
suddenly had three kids, pretty young
oh,
kids, and we had really no family in Chicago, and it's definitely more expensive. And we were doing fine, but it hit a point where we were like, I don't necessarily want to work this hard
right.
for years and years. So, and she has a big family here, and it just kind of worked out that her job had a position open in Cleveland where she got basically to keep the same job and come to Cleveland. And I already knew a bunch of people here. I knew the scene to some degree and had been coming back and playing off and on. So it wasn't, we were excited to come. And then, having a number of free babysitters is pretty incredible.
That might be the main reason. So
Yeah.
let's talk about you playing guitar. Why did you pick up, why did you start playing guitar?
My joking reason is I was terrible at a bunch of other things, but I loved music. So I just was going instrument to instrument. Like I mean, I remember I was so excited about music and hearing music, but then especially in school, they're just like, well, I'm in like fourth or fifth grade, and they're like, just pick an instrument, and it's pretty weird. They just kind of, throw a trombone in your face, and they're like, try this, and you're like, okay, I don't know. So I tried trombone for a while, saxophone for a while. And I think even the band teacher was kind of like, maybe try something else with each one. Eventually, they put me on drums. And then my mom had a really old beat up classical guitar in the house. And I just started messing around with it. And she showed me a few chords. And it's for some reason that it eventually became the thing that clicked. And I mean, I always really reacted to music. And I think the guitar just became the one that worked.
It's, I don't have, and people who have listened to the show will have heard the story before. I have no manual dexterity whatsoever, and I mean none. So in playing the guitar, and then what makes it worse is if I play the instrument, I'm right-handed
Oh, yeah.
until it comes to musicianship. I'm left-handed,
Wow.
which yeah, if you threw a guitar in my hand right now, I'd try to play left-handed. If you threw it, whatever, it's everything's left-handed. What was it like learning playing guitar? I mean, a wind instrument, don't get me wrong, you just need to breathe. But the guitar, four strings, five strings, whatever, and every finger's got to do something with each individual string at a different time. So how did you go about learning this guitar?
I think, I mean, mostly I just figured it out. I wasn't in
Okay.
lessons or anything. I think I had a few beginning lessons and a few books, and I kind of figured out some chords and was just plunking on it a lot. And then once I got decent, I just started trying to figure out the music I was listening to on the radio. So it was really mostly by ear. And I think in a lot of ways that can be a really nice way to learn to some degree because I didn't have any sense of if it was hard or not. I was just trying to
Hmm.
recreate what I was hearing. And I would just spend hours trying to recreate, classic rock songs and then eventually like, 80s rock that I was listening to, Van Halen and stuff like that. And I could just pick it up decently by ear and I was just willing to sit in my room for hours and work on it. Which is funny because then I went to school and did the whole academic thing, and now I'm kind of right back to that, where I'll tell my students, like, you want to learn everything and you want to go into school is great, and obviously, like, dealing with teachers and getting all kinds of different influences. But at the end of the day, like, just sitting down with yourself and music and learning it by ear, I still think is the best, like, tried and true method.
So you yourself are not classically trained.
No, I mean, not until college. I had a very
Okay.
painful uh, kind of jump from being self-taught to suddenly being in a college music program with them kind of looking at me like, we're not sure about you.
So who then were your mentors, or who did you look up to? Who were your guitar heroes, so to speak?
Like at that age, back in the
At that
day.
age, yeah, when you were
Yeah,
younger,
I
yeah.
mean, it was all the young kind of rock people you might think. I mean, it was like Eddie Van Halen and all the like 80s hair bands and stuff like that. And then eventually, um, a piano trio played at my high school for some assembly or something, and I don't really know who it was. I think they were somewhat regional or local, but it was awesome. And it just hit me really hard and got me started kind of trying to find some jazz, which is funny because I think it's still the same today. If you don't have an in to that music and you're just trying, it is really hard to figure out, which I think is too bad. I think a lot of people could get discouraged before they find, inevitably there's so much stuff under jazz that I think everybody
Right.
can find something that hits them, but that journey can take a long time. So I eventually found Emily Remler, who's this wonderful
Oh,
guitarist.
yes, I know that name.
Yeah, unfortunately passed away a long time ago, but was really great and kind of coming out of the West Montgomery tradition and really just like lived with that for a long time. Never really tried to figure it out, but just kind of lived with that. And then I was eventually playing still mostly rock, but in some of these like jam bands in college, and we would tour around. And there was a bass player in one of the bands that just constantly was trying to get me into jazz. And it was kind of a running joke because I would make fun of it because I didn't understand it. And he'd always put it on
Mm,
when we drove together, and he'd be like, "This is Charles Mingus." And I was like, "It sounds chaotic and crazy." And, I just, it's a thing. And I talk about that with my students now because it's like, it's absolutely true that if you have no context and no kind of idea for measuring it, it can sound just like nonsense. And then it's funny the difference once it starts to click. And he eventually found a Dave Holland, John Abercrombie album, the Gateway Trio with Dejanette, and Abercrombie was using distorted guitar. And for me, that was like something clicked. I was like, oh, that sounds kind of like how I want to sound.
the thing that always gets me is, and there are many musicians like you, especially guitar players. How do you get from rock to jazz? I understand that there, as I call them, there are many different silos under the jazz heading, but somehow the screaming guitar of Eddie Van Halen to the, I don't know what you want to call it, the tunes of Emily Rembler is such a distance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of like the big umbrella definition of jazz.
Hmm.
So I mean, I think obviously blues influence, all that stuff's important, but at the end of the day, I think as a music, it is always borrowed from what was around it. That's how it was invented. So I'm happy at all of the diversity you can find in that. And what I do with students today, or if I teach a jazz history class or stuff, is I try and start where they are and then move deeper into the music from there. So I think
Hmm.
like uh, it's a rare person that isn't going to be kind of bumping in their seat if you put on Headhunters, or like, some of Herbie's albums, and half
Yeah,
the people are just like, I would have no idea this is called jazz. And it's like, well,
right.
yeah, there's a lot of that. So I think you can do that for each of them. So, I heard Abercrombie playing distorted and was kind of like, oh, wait, that sounds like rock. Kind of. And then my buddy
Hmm.
was right there to start playing me like Mahavishnu Orchestra and the late
Uh,
Miles stuff and all the kind of funk, jazz, rock fusion stuff. And then I got into it enough and then I started thinking like, well, what other albums does this Miles guy have? Or who are some of these other people playing? And man, you can just follow from the band personnel and even,
right.
starting with that, you're going to get through a lot of the history of jazz.
Yeah.
And I think eventually your my listening just got to where I got more into like what they were playing and what they were improvising than like was it distorted? Did it sound rock or funk or whatever? I just started to really enjoy the melodic sense of the improvisations no matter what and the interaction.
With all that being said, how did you get to the CJO, the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra?
Um when I was living in Cleveland the first time I would just go to his house and study composition with Dave Morgan, who at the
Hmm.
time was their bassist. And he's fantastic. And we got along really well. And I got to play with him for a little while in a few different groups, and then moved away. And then they had a concert. They did the music of Dan Wall and that Kenny Wheeler album, Music for Large and Small Ensembles, and David arranged that for the, or maybe got the arrangements, and he had arranged Dan Wall's music. And so that has some like kind of distorted guitar on it and stuff like that. And I think for whatever reason, Dave just had me in mind. So actually, first time I played with him, I flew back from Texas and for that concert specifically. I
Hmm.
was just here for that. And then since I've been back, they had not really been using guitar very much, and they kind of come and go with guitar. But I guess in the last few years they had a couple of seasons that used a lot of guitar, and I think I play with most of the guys in there already, so I think somebody just gave them my name and did some rehearsals in a concert, and it went well. And I think now they just call me when they need guitar generally.
What's the feeling of playing with the CJO when you're standing up there and the house is filled and you're playing? What's the gut reaction you have to the audience playing that music?
It's really fun. I think the band is a lot of fun, and I think a lot of times the guests that we're able to get just bring a lot of energy. And I'll be excited just to play with that guest for myself, but then
Hmm.
also a lot, it's so fun to be up there with them, and kind of you kind of get pulled into their stage presence a little bit, because a lot
Hmm.
of them are so good at bringing the crowd into it and kind of connecting. I remember just like I got to sit right next to Regina Carter for that whole concert, and she was just making jokes the whole time, and it was just awesome. And so, I think it keeps it really fun. And on a really good night, it's just like amazing. Like when we had Maria Schneider here, I think we did an extra rehearsal with her, and she was really intense in rehearsals. But man, the music sounded so good, and it just felt really good to be a part of it. Just, I think it always, with a big band, it just always feels really cool to be a part of a bigger sound.
I think an occasion would be good if there was a way somehow you could play, but also sit out in the audience and watch you play. Okay, that's our task. We have to come up with something like that. Um, I mean, it's great for me, but I'm not the musician. But to be able to sit next to someone who is playing and ask you questions about what you're playing,
Yeah,
how you're playing, and if I saw Regina Carter telling you a joke, I would ask, why is she telling you jokes? And was the joke funny? And
yeah,
if the joke was funny, how are you reacting? Because you can't necessarily bust a gut laugh because
yeah,
you're still playing.
yeah.
Um,
No, but
it's
I
another.
actually think if the audience sees us laughing up there on stage, I think that's a good thing. I think it just shows everybody's just there to have a good time and connect and all that. I feel like when I got out of school, I felt like you had to be like really stern when you're improvising, and just then there was like this wall between you and the audience. And then I think as you get older, you're like, they're spending money to come here, and half of it is just to kind of connect and, smile at them, make jokes to them.
I, I've always felt the concerts that I've had the most fun at as a listener are the ones where I don't necessarily sit in the first row center. It's about halfway back where I can see the interaction of the band. That's why I'm not necessarily a big fan of how music is recorded today, because you can record at your home studio and then send the tracks to somebody in Detroit and Los Angeles and Switch and wherever.
Yeah,
Because I think you need to see what the other people are doing. And there are times you just you look. I talk to Marcus Miller and I go, why are bass players the most emotive musicians that we have? Because you're always smiling. If the groove is going well, you're moving, and other people are just kind of like sitting there being stoic.
yeah.
But other musicians are like, but that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother class. Um, to see that. I hear you did a project with the CJO's Brad Wagner. How did you two get together?
When I came back, the end of my time in Chicago, I had this sextet that I was writing for and recording and touring. And when I first moved back, I had just released an album. So I did a tour where it was kind of blended with musicians from Cleveland and Chicago. And that was a great tour. And then I kept writing for it and kind of just recreated that group with Cleveland musicians. So I definitely wanted him in it. He's a phenomenal player, and he's also really good at a bunch of horns. So I really like writing for a wide variety of textures and colors. So the fact that he could do like alto, tenor, bass, clarinet, soprano, and do them all really well was made it a lot of fun to write for.
It's my last question. Promise. Promise. But you bring something up to me, and I'm a novice. I listen to music. I don't write music. I don't sing music. I'm not the conductor. But when you say you write a song and it involves drums, saxophones, guitar, bass guitar, whatever, how do you write those different instruments into your piece? And when do you know to do that?
Yeah, this could be a long conversation. Um, but talking about studying with Dave Morgan and just studying music in general, I start with the outside voices because I think that's what people hear the most. So the bottom voice and the top voice. So if I have a melody in my head, I write it out, and maybe that's the top voice. And then the next thing I do to add to that section is to write the bass line. And I need to like how those two lines sound together and how they interact. And also, as soon as you have two notes, you're already kind of implying a harmony. Like, is it major, minor? Is it this or that type of chord? So you're already halfway or more there. So I want to really like the sound of these two notes together, and then what they change to and what they change to. So it gets a little, it takes some time, but that's one approach that I use that kind of, it starts, and then if you get really far just paying attention to the top melody and the bottom melody, you can get a whole song done, and then filling in is much easier. And then I just think about, like, where do I want it to be full? Where do I want it to be a little thinner? And then I just, that group had 3 horns in it, so I would just harmonize things with horns at different parts and have the rhythm section playing different things and kind of go from there.
Please don't take this the wrong way. So one day when you're in the middle of writing a song, I want to be sitting on your shoulder, not me personally, but maybe as a parrot, and be able to watch you do that, because I still believe that musicians are geniuses when you come to putting together. If you start from here, if you start from zero, and when you're done, it's a full-fledged song with, I don't know, orchestral things and all that sort of stuff. Dan, Bruce, I greatly appreciate the time. Thank you for being on the CJO podcast, Jazz in the Land.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Are you playing May 1st? For
the Woodstock?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll come. I try to make it a point to meet everybody because I am new to the organization.
Okay.
So at sometime at halftime, I will walk back, and the guy who's waving will be me.
Nice.
Dan, greatly appreciate the time. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Jazz in the Land, the original CJO podcast.
This has been Jazz in the Land, the CJO podcast on behalf of the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra. Thanks so much to our board and staff and audience and supporters, and especially to the crew that makes this podcast possible, including host Darrell Scott, producers Scott Marsh and George Carr, and associate producer Ricky Exton. Thanks again for your time, and we look forward to sharing jazz with you in the future.